several clergy in Russia.
So was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Kaliningrad.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of what used to be called Global Atheist News Review, but the new, catchier name is Views on the News, and it features a panel of witty and wise people, including these lot. We've got a couple of new members today. We've got Linda, who is in the Thames estuary. We've got Guy, he's a regular. He's in Manchester. And we've got Esther, who's a regular. She is in Birmingham area. We've got Ty, who is a regular. He is in Tennessee. But another new member is Jon, who is in Oregon. Welcome, people. This wouldn't be much of a show without you. Okay, so the first news item I would like you to respond to, it's gruesome, I'm afraid. Iran. The government there says it has publicly hanged a 23-year-old in the second execution that's linked to the recent anti-government protests. This young man, Majidreza Ranavard, age 23, was hanged on Monday, only 23 days after his arrest. His mother wasn't told of his election until after his death, and then his family were given the name of a cemetery and a plot number. When they turned up, security agents were already burying his body. What do you think of that?
Well, it's inhumane, isn't it, really? I mean, the death penalty is an issue in itself, even for the most serious of crimes. But for a non-crime, namely dissent, I think actually he's accused of assaulting an officer, but even for that, it's grossly disproportionate. But what's interesting for me is that in the past, the Iranian regime have executed thousands of dissidents. This is a regular thing, and they've only executed 2 so far, which seems to be on the low side. I'm just wondering why that is. I'm afraid I expect them to kill more people.
Yeah, you're probably right. Actually, he was convicted of not. There is a story that he harmed some police officers, although people who were present don't confirm that. But he was convicted of, listen to this, enmity against God.
Well, we're all guilty of that here.
And proud.
Except that I don't hate God because God doesn't exist.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
We had a really interesting topic just about a couple of hours ago, John Richards and I, and the idea was only getting ever as offended as the God that you worship is observably offended. So basically, if I blaspheme and God doesn't strike me down with lightning, that's probably a good indication that God's cool with it. Don't try to kill me or hang me. There's no need to vicariously be offended for your God. Like, if God isn't doing anything to me, you don't do anything to me. Just leave me be. It's all good. And I wish that road was followed in almost every religious context, because it would save people a lot of time. And if God really did have a problem with it and he showed up and acted upon it, not only would that be justified, I guess, in the God's light, but it immediately destroy every concept of atheism immediately right then and there. It solved that problem, at least, because now it's like, oh, okay, Muhammad came down and totally kicked that guy's butt and then went back up to, afterlife. Like that settles things. I didn't say I'd worship him, but at least we know which one's the real God now, and we will know who not to blaspheme.
That would be a killer piece of evidence, wouldn't it? Yes,
it'd be pretty good.
It's amazing how the morality of us humans is way better than the God of this religion, right?
Sure.
If somebody offends us, we wouldn't think immediately to put them to death, right? We would, try and resolve that. I'm just saying, in with normal people, that's how you would go about doing things. You try and resolve it, and if it's a very heinous thing they've done, you put them in jail, right? Put them in jail 10 years, 5 years, I don't know, just depending on the crime, right? And so an offense against a God that we can't see, we can't touch, we can't feel, where do you begin justifying that sort of thing? And 23 days from the time of he was taken in and the time that he was killed. What about the chance for redemption? What about the chance for asking for mercy? I thought Allah was all merciful. What happened? Allah was all just. Where is justice? Where is mercy in all of this? It sickens me, and can you imagine the mother of this child? What only 23, only 23. Ash, it's so heartbreaking, so heartbreaking.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be able to give you a better piece of news to react to now, which is that the US House of Representatives gave final congressional approval to legislation that provides federal recognition of same-sex marriages. What do you think of that?
I love it. Here's why it stands out to me as particularly good news. It was a protection that was governed or administered by a Catholic, a well-known Catholic, a lifelong Catholic, someone who I believe takes his faith very genuinely, believes it, and still does not use that in his position in his office as an opportunity to lord over people or spread his dogma and ideals, religious ideals, on everybody. He understands that the position of political power that he is temporarily seated in is for the interests of the public and not for him to get brownie points with his God. And I wish more people can look at that and see that as an example from Russian leaders who are hosting religious wars in Ukraine to what's going on in Iran, that you can do both well. And if you want to be a good Christian, you can be, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you then have to force your views and political statements on everybody else. Republican Party can learn a lot from that. I'm just really happy to see that. That's all.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, this is called the Respect for Marriage Act, and it won Senate approval last month. But this House of Representatives vote was 258 to 169. That's all of the chamber's Democrats and 39 Republicans voting in favor. So I guess, John, where you are in Oregon, you provided some of those Democrats, did you?
Yeah. Oregon has been controlled for some time in the state legislature with progressives and pretty secular outlooks. And we should also note that the reason why this is coming up now is because the Supreme Court was unethically but legally packed with religious zealots in many cases now under Trump and under McConnell's. And so they're looking at what's going to potentially happen down the stream after Roe v. Wade was reversed, that the evangelicals would go after other things. And so this was a push to ensure that wouldn't happen. And gay marriage now is pretty well accepted, except for the fundamentalist. And so it was in the Republicans' political safety to do that, because they even know that ship has passed. And so they it wasn't too much of a sacrifice for them to go against much of their base and say, you know, look, I need to do this to get reelected. If I do this, go against it now, it's so well accepted in America that I would endanger my reelection. And that's why those are the two reasons why it happened now, and why Republicans are most Republicans are supporting it.
Yeah. They wanted to shut the door on the possibility that they would, the Roe v. Wade reformers, they can't call them that, the renegers, would extend their influence to other areas. But it's not just.
I was going to add an anecdotal thing too. I'm a recently retired family physician, and Portland has a huge gay population, and I had a lot of gay couples in my practice. And so just for your viewers, they have the same struggles as everybody else in terms of their marriages and their relationships and their commitments. And some of them were more stable and longer lasting than all the non-gay marriages. So it really is, like somebody said, it's not pie. Just because you're slicing it up doesn't mean you get less. There's it doesn't. You can still have your marriage and everything else, but let's not restrict others. And I don't want to take up too much time, but I was actually helping someone in Oregon who got a law passed. It took several years. I actually went down to Salem to help out. And in most areas of the United States, you can have someone at your wedding or your funeral that is not religious, but you couldn't get it signed off officially. And so we went at it from a discrimination standpoint, because if you were an atheist and you had somebody officiate at your wedding or your funeral, you still had to go to the state and pay $150 to get it signed officially by a judge. That the religious didn't have to. Their pastors and their priests could do that. And so using that angle, we were able to get that reversed. And now there are secular people that are trained to officiate, and they can also solemnize the rituals without having to go through that. So it was kind of a win for the state legislature at Oregon for discrimination against atheists.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think here in the UK, humanists and non-religious people, if your marriage is conducted by a humanist celebrant, it is not legal. Those marriages aren't regarded as legal. Only marriages done in a court or in the church. I think mosques as well. I'm not sure about mosques.
Well, I think Guy will have something to update you on this, because now there are more licensed places that can conduct marriages legally. Is that right, Guy?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we need to remember that in Scotland and in Northern Ireland, humanist marriages are legal. Humanist marriages in England and Wales are not effective, and you have to go basically to the registrar to get a civil thing as well. But that law is due for change, and there's been a lot of campaign to get it reformed. Eventually that will happen. As far as funerals is concerned, there's no difference. You can have whatever you want, and humanist funerals are just as effective as any other funeral. But then there's very little. There's no legal issue there.
No.
Anyway.
It's an end rather than the beginning, isn't it? Yes.
It's not
I
just
used to be a humanist celebrant, but incidentally, that's why I'm able to be clear about this.
And Esther is about to become one. Is that right, Esther?
No, I've just finished. So I've
Oh,
booked my first wedding, but it's not until July next year. So I'm looking for
Oh,
need more people
congratulations.
to get married. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank
I
Yes.
want
you. So
I
I'm a
want to highlight
humanist. I'm a
nice.
humanist wedding celebrant. Yes.
It's not
Well
just
done.
US that's also had some good news related to this story. Barbados recently
Yeah.
made some announcements. Esther, would you like to talk on that?
Absolutely. So Barbados is one of three countries in the Caribbean that
Yeah.
has now legalized gay sex. It's no longer it's no longer
A crime.
criminalized. It's now been decriminalized. And yeah, so that's a good a step in the right direction, considering that it's a very Christian, the very Christian nation, Christian values, and because they were colonized by the British, and
Yeah.
so they still hold a lot of the British Christian values.
Well,
Um,
let me interrupt there because it's the old-fashioned British values. It's values from
right.
100 years ago that we've dropped long since.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm. So I want to stay with this issue because it's very contentious just now, since the bishops of the Church of England are meeting to finalize proposals to be submitted to a meeting in February of the governing body of that church called the General Synod about marriage for same-sex couples. Now they've had a problem with this because half of the Church of England, what do they call themselves? The Communion, the Anglican Communion. Those that are in the southern hemisphere, they disagree with marrying same-sex couples. But the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, has to try and keep the northern hemisphere bishops and the southern hemisphere bishops together. And so he's got this document that they'll be discussing called Living in Love and Faith. And the meeting will try and sort out this discrepancy between them. So, fortunately, as it should happen, the evangelical members of the episcopate, that's the American branch of the Anglican Church, who were previously against same-sex relationship marriage, are coming round. But we've still got to try and get the African and Asian and South American, I don't know where they are, bishops on board. And so he's trying to walk this tightrope. And what he said is, I'm not sure whether I will be able to say, I'm not sure what I will be able to say during my time in this job. I can express my own view as far as I know my own mind, and it doesn't change. But the role of Archbishop is to be a focus of unity. This isn't just pragmatic, it's in Christian thinking. That's part of God's call to church leaders. Therefore, I have to be convinced before God that it's the right moment to do it. So we're watching him. I don't know how he's going to cope with this, but what do you think, guys? What do you think about this?
I think there's a real potential for a split in the Anglican Communion between the homophobic end and the sort of more progressive end. Now they've managed to avoid it up to now, but I'm not sure how much longer they can do it.
No, Linda wanted to say something. Linda, can you come in here?
Yes, John, I was just going to say, I think they're really stressing it. They really don't want to concede this point, but they realise that the public pressure is getting quite heated on it. And
Yes.
really want to resist it. You can see it, can't you, in what they say. It's really against their better judgment. They know that God knows it's wrong. They know, really. But what do? They know they've got to accept change. So it's a dilemma for them. It's obviously absolutely absurd. And I'm delighted that we're making some moves towards addressing this, and I'm delighted on the US decision as well, and I hope it does spread further, and I think the way it's going, it's going to spread further. I certainly hope so.
Yeah, I hope you're right too.
I think you're right, Linda. I think they've kicked this can down the road, and it's a cul-de-sac now. There's no way out. I've followed it a little bit, and the African the bishops and there are very much literalists, like evangelicals, and you have the Anglicans here in the UK that are much more liberal and progressive. And let me tell you, when it comes to a fundamentalist and a literalist, they are not going to back down from reading the Bible exactly the way they want to. So certainly in America, there are, I think the Presbyterians split over some issues like creationism and this sort of thing. And I think the Methodists also split recently. And so it's the Anglicans' time to, both sides are going to dig in, and ecumenical attitudes are not going to probably keep the fissure from going. But, you look at Protestants, and there's a reason why the Roman Catholic Church didn't want to get that Gutenberg thing going and get it printed out, because there's 40,000 Protestant sects now that have spent time. And so this is certainly a pattern that happens with religion. That's why there's thousands of religions. And I would like to contrast that with science, which tends to converge on truth versus split. There's no Christian algebra or Islamic geology. It's so there's a reason why the search for truth is usually much better. It's always better with science and common sense than it is with religion.
Yeah, it's fun watching them split, though, isn't it?
Yeah. Jon, can I just say, I've never heard it put that way before, and I love the way you explained it. There really is only one science, hundreds and thousands of religion, and that must say something, mustn't it? To us, it's so utterly absurd, the religions, because it seems so completely logical, and it's hard sometimes to understand how some people can't see what we say is sense. But I like that. I'm going to use that.
Let me throw in a couple more things. One is, I think it could have been Ricky Gervais said if you started the world over again, there would be all kinds of different religions, but everybody would find out science and math would still be repeated. And so there's a basic difference there.
Yeah, that was Ricky. Ricky on the show one day.
I've heard it said that science is in the business of religion is in the business of proving itself right, but science is in the business of proving itself wrong.
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. Yeah. Exactly. That's the difference. Yep.
I also heard this famous saying.
Also wanted to talk about the so that like the African way of doing religion, the African, because I'm originally African, right? Until I moved over here, and they take the books very literally.
Yeah,
they're told that you have to follow this book letter for letter. The things in the books, they happened. There's proof. You don't have the proof. You in Africa don't have it. But don't worry. Your pastors, your imams, they have been to the studies. They've seen the proof. They've seen the evidence. And so whatever they tell you, you've got to listen to them. They are the representatives of God, and God has chosen them specifically to be his representative. He's appeared to them in the dream. He's accosted them on their way somewhere, whatever. And so when these people believe that, there's nothing you can't make them believe. because they believe that someone else has done the hard work. Someone else has done, so I don't need to look for proof. My pastor's done it. He knows what's that all of this is true.
Yeah. Well, there are some people for whom the only thing that will make them change their mind is death. Oh, that was a conversation stopper.
I'm trying to figure out what you mean. I'm trying to figure out what you mean. The only thing you're telling them is stop. Is it that when who dies? When you say death?
When the people who hold the dogmatic views die, that's the only way those views will be changed.
Right.
The older generation has to pass away before the newer generation comes up.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is what's happening in the UK. We've had our latest census figures that have shown that the church, the Christian belief, is now below 50%.
Yeah.
And I think it's largely because the older generation is dying off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So I want to finish with a rather upbeat item, because there was a so-called bishop. In fact, he named himself Bishop Climate. I don't know why he chose that name. And he was in Camberwell, which is in South London. His real name is Wiseman. And at the beginning of the pandemic, he came out with a plague protection kit, which he was selling to his congregation at a cost of £91. And he told them that if they didn't buy it, they could drop dead from COVID. And it turns out that these plague protection kits are made of oil and red string.
Wow.
So when he was rumbled, this was at the beginning of April 2020, when the COVID was just starting up, and lockdown was just beginning. And at that time, there were no products licensed for the treatment of COVID. So it was obvious that his product was unlicensed. And the licensing authority, Southwark Trading Standards, got in touch with him. First of all, they bought a copy, an example of his product, and found out that it was just oil and string. And also there was some sort of BBC investigation when secret phone recordings and testimony were made. Anyway, cutting to the end, Southwark Trading Standards wrote to him asking him to remove all mention of plague coronavirus prevention from his literature and websites, and to stop making claims about curing coronavirus. When he didn't fully comply with that, they closed down his Kingdom Church.
I mean, it's just another example of the sort of fraud and deception that I'm afraid we're rather too familiar with.
Yeah. There you go. So, guys, thank you very much. Your views have been noted.
Thank you.
This will be the last Views on the News that we record in 2022.
I want to bring up one last quote that, since we were bringing up quotes, this is by famous French mathematician Andrew Bourgeois, who in classical age said, "God sucks."
What's he sucking on?
Pocketbooks.
Ask your parents.
Guys, have a lovely Christmas. Please do.
Okay.
Take care.
Happy solstice.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Several clergy in Russia.
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Kaliningrad.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, Guy?